Okay, so how many people were here last month for Venkat's presentation? Okay, so one of the comments that was made in passing was, wow, this is an interesting tech that we should probably be looking at next year, which turned out nice because I had just finished a POC. So I would like to talk today about Backstage, and in particular about internal developer portals. So a week can't go by in a big company without learning a new TLA. So this week's TLA is an IDP, an internal developers portal. I'm not going to read the quote from the marketing website, but the key thing to draw your attention to is in a way that lowers cognitive load on your developers. By the way, has anybody installed Backstage or another IDP? Okay, so this market seems to be very, very nascent. Either people are playing with things or they've built their own or there's a whole lot of excitement around them. So hopefully you guys will learn something. Okay, let's talk about cognitive overload. One of the biggest challenges that I had 4 years ago when I joined ADP was for the first time in 20 years I was walking into an environment where I knew nothing about what was going on. And I'll be blunt, the onboarding experience was rough. So where's the docs? How do I provision my accounts? How do I provision this? How do I provision that? So one of the things that as developers we encounter is what's now being referred to as cognitive overload. All of the things that you have to remember, all of the things that you have to know in order to do your day-to-day job. And worse, when it hits the fan and you find yourself in an outage, you're trying to remember where stuff is. So roughly, how many tools do you guys use any given day? 2? 20? 4, right? So in a given week, is it, again, 5, maybe 10? So think about you got your check-ins, you got your code, you got your build, all of that. How many different places do you have documentation about your system, right? So we start with Google Docs, then we go to Confluence, then we go to SharePoint, then we go to just your local machine or the email that people have forwarded around forever about how to provision. When you hire a new employee, how long does it take to get them on board? All right, so this is all of the things that come into this cognitive overload. Now, you're probably looking at this going, well, that's what we built wikis for a decade ago, right? That's what Confluence was supposed to solve. The problem is all of these tools make it really easy to create. It makes it really hard to bring it together into one place so you can go when you need it and go and get something. So typically there are 2 types of IDP. And again, this is a very new market, so this will probably be wrong in a month. But the 2 main ones that we encountered during our proof of concept were what we call developer focused. So as a developer, where do I find my APIs? Where do I run if I'm using Swagger or if I'm using one of the open tools? How do I actually go and run one of those APIs so I can run a test? Where's my documentation? For the tool I'm working on, where's my pipelines? Right? Where are my deployment instructions? So the last one is what they call scorecards, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but this is more of a management thing where how do I go and find out the status of my project? So how many of you guys use Sonar? Okay, I see a few hands. Or similar tools where you have information about how your code is doing, what your quality is, what your defect counts are. Again, if I asked you, so where's your Sonar dashboard for this particular module, how long is it going to take you to go find that? But the idea behind the IDPs is you bring all this together into one place. You make it easy for a developer, knowing I'm working on module A, to go see everything related to module A in one place. Now, as a manager or as an architect, if you own a couple of these teams, this is also a powerful view, so I can go and see how many of my teams are actually got the JDK 22 upgrade going. I can very easily integrate with a tool that lists for all of the deployed containers what version of the JDK are running, grep it to find the module that I'm looking at and say, hey, Chris, you own these 4 teams, 3 of them have got the JDK 22 upgrade done. Who doesn't? Instead of having to go to the teams and having to go look. The other one is what's called operations focused. And here is where it's not just about the developer, but it's during the outage. It's about the day-to-day, how do I get to the right tools? So if I said to you right now, hey, go add 4 more pods to your Kubernetes cluster for the service that you own, how many can do it in 2 clicks? How many could do it at all without going and having to find where you had the deep link into the Kubernetes dashboard in order to figure out how to find the right pod that's hung underneath this menu choice? The second type of IDP are focused on execution, where knowing that I'm the team that owns this service, when it comes time to add pods, there's a button to press. It either deep links me all the way into that tool, or, because so many of these things these days are API driven, just shows me a pop-up, tells me the number I want, and then does it behind the scenes for me. So this is the second side of the cognitive overload, and to me, I think this is going to be the most interesting one, is as we get into a model where hopefully outages are rare, war rooms are rare, when it happens, how quickly can I get the team together to go and figure out what's wrong? How do I find the right dashboards? How do I go to the right place quickly? Instead of in a WebEx chat, having everybody start throwing links at everybody because nobody can remember where everything is. Any questions about these 2 main types? Or why I've differentiated between 2? Any questions in general about IDPs? All right, let's talk specifically about Backstage. So Backstage, like many interesting open source tools, came out of a company that, and I completely forgot to put the name up here, that built something and said, hey, this is kind of interesting. We should probably open source this. It's not our core business, but let's open source this. And I'm having a complete brain miss on what the name of the company is, but Spotify, thank you. But they open sourced it. First thing about Backstage, which is still a little weird, is it is an install. It's not just any install, it's a source code install. So you actually download from their GitHub, yarn install, right? It installs locally. Adding stuff to it are yarn install pick a package. It's written in Node.js, so it's highly extensible. But again, coming out of a world of SaaS for the last 15 years, everything you just buy, right? Give them a credit card and it's there, or it's an installed package. You don't have to compile source anymore. It is from source. So it's a little weird, but still is what makes it extensible. It's got a robust plugin architecture which is focused around being extensible. And this is one of the more interesting pieces of this particular tool, is they don't pretend to have everything. They built it saying, we expect people to come in and add their own tools. So you don't use Jenkins, you use Concourse, different plugin. Don't use GitHub, use Bitbucket. Okay, different plugin. All of those are built into the tool so that it's easy to extend. What also makes this tool very interesting from a long-term, again, I did a POC and an evaluation on this for my company, is it's what's technically called GitOps or Git DevOps, depending upon which group. Almost nothing is stored in this tool. Everything that they expect you to do is to have it in your source code repository. So for example, all your docs are in Git. So as your team is doing their pull requests and they make a change, there should be a question during the check-in of, do we need to update the docs? Not, hey, did you remember to go to Confluence? No, it's, did you make the change in the docs that we're going to put in the same commit? Likewise, Swagger. Hopefully you guys are using a Swagger or an open API. Drive it off of the source code. Don't worry about how do I compile it, how do I build the presentation tier. This tool takes care of it. And the thing I like at the last comment's the best one, is there's very little knowledge in the tool. So if these guys decide that they're going to walk away from it, which is a fear in an open source project, especially a brand new one, there's almost nothing in the tool that your teams have built where your knowledge is, how you do things. So you can go hopefully to a different tool. And I'll show you an example when we look quickly at the configuration, but the idea here is the tool wakes up every few hours, polls your GitHub, and finds projects that have a specific file in their top level. From that file, they build the UI. So let me show you the UI. So here's an example of what the UI looks like. So this UI is entirely based off of files in GitHub. It's got a backend database. Am I moving too much? Okay. It has a back-end database because the speed of starting this in a non-trivial number of services is kind of slow. So they do cache some stuff. But the idea is it wakes up, reads from a file, and says, okay, this is what my relationships are. So in this example, I've got two services, one called the DevNexus signup, and the other's, a nice generic web front-end name. I come in, I select DevNexus signup, and here I can see, and I'm going to open that, I apologize, the graph of all of the other projects that Backstage is aware of and how it is being used by this service. This is maintained by the consumer. So me as the team that is consuming, in this case, the REST API, I just have a one-liner that says I'm consuming this particular project. Backstage marries it all together and builds you the nice pictures. Now, simple two-service application there. This isn't very interesting. But think about a 50 service, 100 service. Think about the fact that it's not just talking about services, it's talking about APIs, it's talking about databases, it's talking about your Kubernetes, your Redis, everything else. This is one place where I can go really quickly, look at my service, and see everything it consumes. Think about cognitive overload or lack thereof when, as a developer, I can come in and take a real quick look and see, okay, I see kind of roughly what's going on here. Now, want to come in and see my APIs. And by the way, this broke. Wouldn't be a demo, right? Ideally, this should have opened a Swagger. I don't know what happened yesterday. It stopped working. Demo. But ideally what happens here is you will see the Swagger that's associated with this API. And again, I didn't compile this. I didn't ship it somewhere. I didn't have to tell the tool to go link it. It, based on your CI/CD pipeline, picked up where in Git you dropped that file that OpenAPI builds when you do your build. So again, as soon as I add a change here, I do my build, it gets deployed, my documentation refreshes. I don't have to go and ask the team, hey guys, where's your Swagger? Because it's already in the tool. So if this isn't my team, I can quickly get my hands on their Swagger to see what their APIs look like. Let's talk about docs. And it wouldn't be a demo. What's it complaining about now? Oh, okay, it's trying to go through a proxy. Never mind. Ignore that. But here again, this is documentation for, I forget which project this was that I found that was open source, but it's a markdown. And again, if this is in GitHub, the tool takes care of building through make docs the documentation. So now I've got all of this stuff that used to be spread all over the place in one place. I can very quickly come in and say, tell me everything I need to know about whatever the service is. And that is my 10 minutes of lightning. The guys who own this are apparently going to be at DevNexus, and I forgot to ask Glenn before he walked out, but my understanding is they'll be there, so there'll be a whole lot better presentation about this, but this is an intro to an IDP. Questions? Yes? Hey.
Yeah, in the first slide, right, you talk about there are two kinds of IDP.
Yeah.
One caters to the development, the other the other catering to the management and the operations, right? Yep. Do you see anything that kind of combines the two?
So in the evaluation that we did, so the question is, I've broken them out into two types, but could they be combined? Yes, definitely. Especially in a true model where the team owns production. The UI that I'm showing here, select one of these. You've got this little section down here on the bottom for Lings and has subcomponents. These are where the plugins land. So I could very easily put the plugin that is, show me the dashboard associated with my Grafana. Or here's the link to the Splunk queries. Those kind of things could easily be integrated in here. The literature, the people who talk about this talk about the two types, but I think in reality, to Jing's point, we're going to pull it all together for the people who own both. Anybody else? Cool. Well, thank you. This is something cool. So.